Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our 204th episode of Open Up, a live podcast simulcasting on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, where we engage with important and influential figures on critical social issues. Hi, my name is Dipchand Ramcharitar. I'm the Outreach and Development Coordinator here at Voice of Men 360. We are based in London, Ontario, and essentially advocate for men and boys in our community. We also, however, reach out to other demographics as best we can. We are affiliated with International Men's Day, which has been serving in a similar capacity for over 25 years in over 95 countries. Before we go further, I would like to get into our disclaimer for today. We would like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith towards peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers and do not necessarily represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness of the issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges. We are not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend you contact a medical professional immediately. If you have any questions or concerns about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360 content, please email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. Now, on with the show. Today, we would stick around in Toronto. Usually, we go overseas, but we are here today to meet and greet a prominent member of our community. He is Daniel Nithi, Executive Director of Child Protection and Family Services Specialist in Canada. Before I introduce Daniel, I want to welcome everybody in the audience. It's a pleasure having you all on here as well. I thank you all for taking the time to join us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, but my only request is that you wait until the show is complete and you can have your questions asked and answered then. So here we go. Daniel Nithi, welcome to our show. It's a pleasure having you on today. So kindly introduce yourself briefly. And after that, I would follow that up with a question that today we are speaking about child custody or matters related to such and how it impacts men. So please introduce yourself, followed by the following question. How do child custody disputes impact men's mental health and suicidal tendencies? Daniel.
But hey, everyone, thanks for joining. So I'm Daniel. I'm the director at Safe Harbor Family Aid. Started working at Child Protection Services for a little over a decade now. And then while my tenure there, I saw a huge service gap. So families facing children's aid involvement often get legal help, and only if it's court involved. So community agencies do great work with the families that are involved. However, they're not trained to answer child protection related questions. Lawyers are crucial at court, but they don't walk the families through the investigations when that initial phone call comes reporting of child abuse. So this leaves many parents, a lot of fathers, many of them racialized, low income, or newcomers to Canada, defending themselves in a system where they just don't understand. And that's where we come in. We fill that gap. So we pretty much translate CA's language into plain English and help parents respond quickly to child protection investigations, prepare them to show real progress and pivotal points in that investigation. Because our belief is quite simple. So advocacy shouldn't just be for people that can afford it. It should be accessible to everyone. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so how do the child custody, disputes impact men's mental health and suicidal tendencies?
So working in a child protection manner. So this is where a lot of discrepancies happen, where people think the parents, either the father or the mother, are the clients. However, the child is the primary client. So what tends to usually happen is, if, for example, if fathers or anyone that is in a caregiving role has, suicidal ideation or tendencies or self-harm, the referral just goes out to a psychologist or, a family physician or a doctor, and then we just make sure that they follow up with that appointment. As for any one-on work that's done, the child protection tends to not be a mitigating factor in that department.
Right. Well, I guess that's as far as you can go, and obviously that's a very critical and important step that you can take towards getting
Right.
that person help. So, my next question is, what strategies can be implemented to help parents work together effectively in the best interest of the child, while also addressing the unique challenges faced by fathers in the child protection system?
Right. So in Ontario, the law is pretty clear. It's in the best interest, and that always first and foremost comes first. And also, your involvement should be the least disruptive option that keeps the child safe. So that means the ideal parents are working together, not against each other. So that involves day one clarity. So parents need to know what children's aid is assessing, what the concerns are, and what success or outcome or goals look like for them. That dropping that fear is what makes the path clear. So when parents get involved with children's aid and the fear takes over and they're not really sure what they got involved for, that's when mistakes happen and things that they wouldn't normally say or do out of fear and anxiety. They may do something that might prolong their involvement. Second, co-parenting routines, right? Like the parents don't have to necessarily get along with each one another, but they just need to learn to co-parent. Right, that's the key piece, right? That addresses child protection concerns. So if one parent is responsible for one thing, the other parent's responsible for the other, and as long as they can manage that, clear, structured guidance is what's going to get them there. If they make it like a tit for tat situation, it's going to make it difficult for them to co-parent and then make decisions that are in the best interest of the child, and then that in and of itself creates unique challenges, right? This will kind of answer like two questions at once.
Right.
So I think the important piece is to get fathers involved very early, right? So like too often the dad gets that phone call very late. So in a typical family, it's not all the time, but in my line of work, I've noticed that in 80% of our involvement, the person you're going to get a hold of first is the mother. She will, likely be home, after 4 o'clock when the child returns home. Child protection, though they do run 24-hour service, after hours is a skeleton crew. So what usually tends to happen is that day worker wants to meet with the child, meet with a parent, and observe the household for safe living arrangements, conditions, and etc. So they're going to try to want to do this before 8 p.m. So now if you have a dad that's coming home, for example, at 7 or 8 p.m., the chances of, because the work can still get done without actually having the father involved, right? So that's how they immediately, right from the beginning, they get streamlined out of the service. And then this now turns into a situation where, they may looked upon as a person that's not really interested, not engaged, or just downright avoidance, right? So this is like one of the biggest challenges that, they could face as fathers in the child protection system.
Yeah, it's critical, as you mentioned. One of the things I know, and obviously this is anecdotal, that parents unfortunately seem to tug at each other and use the child as as some sort of a ploy in their quest to hurt one another. And
Right.
as you mentioned, and as we all know, the most critical thing in this whole brouhaha is the best interest of the child. So,
Right.
we hope that more parents are more willing, put their differences aside as far as the child is concerned. You can claw at each other after, but once the child is
Right.
involved, so that's crucial. Now, when we come to one of the things, I think with men in general, they're always assumed to be the perpetrators. Anything happens, if you hear the word violence, domestic violence, it's always the assumption that the man is at fault or he's the perpetrator, he's the violent one.
Right.
We obviously have statistics to dispute that. There are cases where it's both, and when it's one directional, sometimes it's one or the other. It's not
Right.
exclusively men. So one of the things I think the public perception is something that really I think we have to address, because it's unfortunate that so many men are tried, feathered and tarred before, and even if there is a trial, the social media trial just puts them up against all odds, and really go at them. So having said all of that, how can we promote a culture of co-parenting and collaboration in child protection cases, rather than focusing solely on assigning blame or fault?
Right. So I think one of the biggest challenges is like in child protection is blame. So parents get caught up in, so the who messed up cycle, and then the child gets lost in the middle. And it's I think it's important that you touched on this point that, the fathers tend to be looked as the perpetrator. So even the system, so all the information that's recorded in a child protection investigation gets lodged into a system called the Child Protection Information Network. So it
Right.
is Canada wide. And once your information goes in there, it just never leaves at all. No, you can't do anything about it. It just sticks there. But even the system is flawed. So for example, automatically, if you're not paying attention and you're in a moment of crisis working with a family and you're typing in information, the father always automatically gets put as perpetrator number one. So if you're just not paying it, the system automatically puts it like that, right? There's no reason to do that. It doesn't need to pre-fill something, but it does that anyway. So even little minute things on a macro level, on a systemic level, the father is
Right.
already observed to be like that, right? And I think going back to your question. So for example, like one parent might agree to programming and accessing skills, and then the other parent for co-parenting can look at the housing, the financial stability. Another great thing that a lot of families don't utilize is ADR, so alternate dispute resolutions. That's funded by the government. It's accessible. It's available for the families to use. However, it's underutilized from my experience, right? And there was another point that I was having here. So, like, what specific steps that parents could make to make sure the child is at the home, right? So, what concrete commitments a parent can make, and I think the important piece is to co-parent. Somebody else can't be telling you what to do. So they need to take ownership and responsibility to the things that they agree for. So that likelihood of them actually following through is higher.
Right. You mentioned something about government offers a service that is underutilized. Can you elaborate just a little on that so that people can have a better understanding of what it entails?
Right. So it's mediation. So there's like family group conferencing, even Children's Aid, they provide something called the Family Centered Conference, right? So where you can sit there in a neutral setting with somebody like a mediator there, trying to not take a side, but helping you and the other parent come to like a mutual agreement, without the possibility of whatever that's happening in your current dynamics escalate and likely result in court involvement. Now, nobody really utilizes this, and sometimes people aren't even aware of this. What ends up happening is things start circulating and escalating, and it ends up in court. Now the court orders the family to go through mediation. But at that point, my experience is that mediation is quite not helpful. Once you land in court, it just
Right.
becomes like a tick box you just checked off, like, hey, I did it. Now you make the decision for my family. So you have to ask yourself, are you and the other parent going to make a decision on your child? Or are you going to underutilize the services that are made available? It is a costly thing. It's like about $3,000 for mediation, which the government and everybody
Wow.
pays for, right?
Yeah.
So if you underutilize it, you put the hands of your family dynamics at a court, and they base it on what you and your partner has said. And here's the thing that people get a shock value as soon as they land in family court. It is not
Yeah.
criminal court where it's innocent before proven guilty,
Yeah.
90%, blah, blah, blah. It's 51%, 49. So if the court thinks 51%, you're telling the truth, they're going to lean in your direction. So, for example, if you land in a situation where the other person is not telling the truth, but they're able to tell a very, convincing, fabricated recollection of what's happened, the
Yeah.
court can lean in that way.
Can I
So,
interrupt you for a second? I just
yeah,
wanted to, is it in that system, is
yeah,
it based on the balance of probability as opposed to evidence?
yes. So evidence is
Okay.
of course factored in, but 51%, 49%, right? So as long as the court thinks this has happened at 51%, they're gonna lean in that direction. Right. So that's why, apprehension, being able to remove the child out of a family's care it's not difficult. Children's Aid
Right.
opts not to do this and tries to leave that as a last resort, but it's not difficult to do. Because
Yeah.
remember, apprehension works in this way. So as a child protection worker, should I apprehend today? I have 5 days to actually go before the courts and explain to the court why I did what I did. Right?
Okay.
I don't need court's original permission. As long as myself and the team, makes a conscious decision that this child's at risk, we could remove, like, again, because based on the evidence that we're seeing for that present moment, right? We're not going to
Right.
sit there for the whole day figuring things out. Just in that moment, if you feel that the child's at risk, comes into care.
Okay. So you assess the situation and act accordingly.
Yeah, and act accordingly. And then at court, then we would, write the affidavit and then present our case to court, and then the judge will, stamp it.
Okay.
So we don't actually have to go get, like a warrant, like if we see something down the road, yes, like and a potential, we can go get a warrant to apprehend. But
Right.
prior to that, if we walked into a household and we see something going down and there's utter chaos, you can
Yeah.
make that decision to remove that child to a place of safety.
Okay. All right. Very good. How can now we have situations obviously with no two families, or in fact no two people really have everything similar. There are differences. So when it
Right.
comes to child situations, we're looking at factors like like social status, income status, probably geography, ethnicity, whether you just
Right.
landed in Canada or wherever you're going to. So,
Right.
keeping all that in mind, how can we ensure that child protection services are tailored to meet the unique needs of each family rather than relying on a one size fits all approach?
Right. So that, like, the cookie cutter option just never works in child protection. Every family individual is, like, it's fluid, right? The dynamic changes quite significantly. They could, tap into kinship supports, for example, their aunties, their uncles, grandfathers, grandparents, paternal, maternal. With that being said, being tailored, in theory, it sounds great. Unfortunately, practical, like the practical part of it is just not sometimes feasible, just to implement.
Right.
For example, a child protection worker is not involved on a daily basis like a counselor would with you, right? So they would come for the initial investigation, and then so, like, the system is flawed. Though they are trying to be supportive, and they are, child protection is a great service to have. Otherwise, children will be at risk. But then you, as parents, also need to be there's a lot of ownership and responsibility that's should be undertaken by the parent as well, or they just get lost in the system, because a child, like, an investigation happens with one worker. Now, should they feel that you do require services, it gets transferred to an ongoing service worker who will be a worker for the foreseeable future. But they're only going to meet you once a month, right?
Oh, okay.
Sometimes they might check in with the phone. So it's not like a counselor where you're going to see them, every like on a weekly basis. Bi-weekly basis happens if it's a very high risk involvement, which is
Right.
not always the case. Otherwise, they're seeing you in 30 days, things could happen. They could go on vacation, you could go on vacation. And then the general truth is that when you're not seeing someone for that 30 days, you tend to forget what your conversation was, what was asked of you, and and then, like,
Yeah.
right before they call and reconfirm that appointment, you're just like, oh snap, like I was supposed to do this, right? And
Yeah.
then they're looking, because for them it's, I asked you to do something, you're a grown adult, you just have not done so. So now
Right.
you're not following through with the services. Now you get prolonged into the service. Your 6 months involvement just automatically just gets jump started into one whole year involvement, right? Under scrutiny, under constant observation. Yeah. So like with a tailored service, and also the individual, like, when they're having a caseload of like 18, 19 files, now they'll do their best to put you into the right services, but they're not going to follow up with you continuously, like, hey, do this, and why is this not working? Like the services will be there, the resource will be provided, but there's not really too much monitoring going there, and then the extra push to get you to engage in these services. Should you not, you're just going to be faulted for it.
Yeah. Sounds like it's a lot for one person to handle, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
There are certain areas that that can be improved, and certainly it seems that way. At least there should be some recommendations out there to see how best to improve the overall system. Now, I know we touched. Sorry, you wanted to add something?
No. Go ahead. Yeah.
I know we touched on mediation in the previous question, but I have a actual question regarding that, which is
Okay.
what role can mediation and other alternative dispute resolution methods play in helping parents work together in the best interest of their children?
Right. So I think like if you like focus on, for example, mediation. So why it works is it's not just children's aid that's dictating that plan. They're there to support you with it. But you as parents, you could involve, if you're struggling to manage the child's needs, you could bring in your kinship supports, like the paternal grandparents, maternal grandparents, even friends and family. So it strengthens the solutions, right? And then
Right.
data actually shows that when you use like ADR type of solutions, it's shortened the amount of time children's aid actually got involved, because they're monitoring as to how you are addressed. There's a concern there that within your family dynamics, but they're also aware that things have been working well for a prolonged period of time. If you have a child that's 8 years old and you get into a child protection involvement, okay, so something happened today, but for 8 years you've been managing. So there's positives there. Something's been working, right? So now you have to tap into the strengths, and the only way to do that is if you utilize these services and then figure it out. So if you have like a situation where there's parents that are separated, which is often the case, and they're just not able to communicate with one another, and then conflict always ensues. I mean, like child protection workers say, you could fight in the background like cats and dogs all you want, but in front of the child, like, don't do that. If you can't control yourself, a lot of families, what they do is to avoid the whole situation, they do the exchange at the Toronto police station.
Okay.
Right, so it's utilized quite often. So these are the things that you can explore. There's different avenues, and then also avoids the court battle, right? That's the most important thing. Just avoids court altogether when you utilize these services. And then it also gives people ownership. So when you own the plan, you're likely going to follow through with it, because you can no longer say at this point, my CAS worker told me to do this, or the counselor told me to do that. No, this is your plan. You signed on it. Should you have an issue with it, like, it puts ownership back onto the parents, right? So they're more inclined to follow through because there's no more blaming after that.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I think ADR.
Yeah.
So the parents, either or both of them, when they get into this situation, how do they become aware of all these options that they have? Because I'm guessing when they just get into it, they're just probably just going at each other, and the child is caught in the middle, and they don't know what to do.
Yeah. So there's a lot of services that are actually available. If you had a conversation with your children's aid worker, they'll let you know, because they want you to be successful. So part of the goals that they have with you is you utilizing these services. But the issue is, when families get involved, it just brings on automatic fear. So you want to have the least amount of interactions as a parent with a child protection worker, because you just know anything you say is going to get documented. If in their mind, if I screw up and say something I'm not supposed to say, is that going to get used against me? So you want, a lot of times families are not forthcoming with a lot of information, because they have this misconception that omission of a truth is not a lie.
Right.
So that plays a role into it. And then so when you're not utilizing the services, sometimes it skates through, right? Where child protection sees, no issues coming through and
Right.
okay, we'll terminate the file. But since you have not addressed the issue, sooner or later you get re-involved with the system. That's when things take a turn. Because if you get involved with Children's Aid for the second time in a row for the same concerns, now
Yeah.
it's an issue. Yeah.
Okay. So when you go to Children's Aid, can you have legal representation at the time?
Yeah, you could always have a legal representation, but the population that Children's Aid typically tends to serve are not in a financial capacity to afford legal services. When you're involved in court, should you not be able to afford a lawyer and you fall under a certain bracket, you could get a legal aid certificate to have a legal aid lawyer. But
Right.
that's only if you're court involved. Legal aid is not going to give you a lawyer to have conversations with Children's Aid. So
Oh, I see.
so there's like literally nobody there that's actually going to know the ins and outs of a system other than a lawyer to kind of help you navigate the situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what specific challenges do fathers face in child protection cases, including misconceptions, and how can we address those?
Um, so I think with challenges that they're often just invisible, right? Because if you're addressing the concerns with a parent, like that's a bare minimum requirement for child protective services, to ensure the safety of the child. So if it's for example school attendance, if it's the child's behavior at school, then as long as you're addressing the issues with a parent, if the father is not, for example, available because of work or etc., there's no really reason for you to not stop your whole service with the family just because the dad's not involved, right? You could carry on with the work, close the file. I mean, I myself have taken on cases where I had a 6-month involvement with the family and I never spoke to the father once, right?
Okay.
And that happens quite often, whether he's co-parenting, whether he's not in the picture, whether they're separated or he's working long hours. You might have like 1 or 2 interactions with them, and of course Children's Aid will definitely advocate for the father to get involved and for the worker to communicate with the father. But you're not going to kind of chase after the person. I'll just give you an example here. So as a day worker, you're not restricted to a 9 to 5, because given family dynamics, you might have to go see a family at 6 p.m. Now, is it actually like feasible for you to have 19 families that you're working with and all 19 fathers finish work at 8 p.m.? How are you actually going to see him? It's very difficult, right? You might see them once,
Yeah.
but after that, you just going, as long as you as a worker know that the child is safe and mom is making sure that the child is having their needs met, and that is supposedly helping from the background, there's really no reason for you to prolong the case just because you're not having conversations with that. And that tends to be the case because most of the time the father tends to be the one, with the service population of Children's Aid, the father tends to be the one that's working long hours and etc., right?
Right. So, on that theme, how can we ensure that fathers are included in decision making processes and have a meaningful role in child protection cases?
So I think that honestly comes on a systemic level, because if you bombard a caseworker with so many files and you hand them 20 files and there's only 20 business days to actually see a particular client, you're already restricting the worker's ability to do that.
Right.
But the best way to go about this is to engage the father from day one, right? Even if you
Okay.
can't meet the father physically, there's no reason to not. So some of the tactics and avenues I've used is email, phone, voicemail, right? Children's Aid actually had taken a more proactive approach, I believe, starting in 2021. So it took that long before
Wow.
Children's Aid allowed workers to communicate with parents via text messages. All of a sudden, the involvement of even fathers and mothers increased, right? Because nobody checks the voicemail. I barely check mine, right? I
Okay.
think if you really want to get a hold of me, you should probably text me, right? So I could quickly read and see what it's about.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. So same thing. If you are yourself like that, you should also see that you shouldn't have that other extended expectations of a parent. They're working, right? So giving it the text so that dad could respond back. So like little things. Like we live in a technological world. I think we
Right.
should use that to our advantage to create engagement. That's exactly what it is there for, right?
Right.
It shouldn't have taken us 3 decades to come to this conclusion, but it's slowly starting. And then also the thing is, are workers still utilizing, because so, like if the workers are not, if they're seasoned for not doing certain things for a prolonged period of time, they may not do it, because the risk that comes with engaging in this way is, should you text a parent, right, or a child or like a teenager that you're working with, you open a Pandora box where, for example, if you don't turn off that phone, and then if it's after hours, and they, for example, if a father or a child displays suicidal ideation, and you just had that phone on but didn't respond, and something happens,
Yeah.
there's a liability issue at that point,
Oh,
right?
I see. Okay.
So like that's the risk. So it's like a catch-22. It could work, but then it could also work against you. So a lot of people are hesitant, a lot of workers are hesitant to utilize that avenue,
Right.
right? So unless you're a type of person that's at 5 o'clock, the phone turns off, the chair is spinning. If you're not one of those individuals, and you just forget and you put the phone in the handbag and you just leave,
Yeah.
and then that message comes at Saturday, you're not paying attention, and you look at it on Monday, that's a problem.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if you're not working on Sunday. If that text comes and you just have, or the phone call comes and you have it on,
Right.
you have to address it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that could be a serious issue, as you say. So
Right.
you better be paying attention.
Yeah.
Can you
But then,
share any
right?
examples of successful interventions or outcomes for fathers in child protection cases?
So successful interventions. So I think so I wrote this part down for the other day, looking at like what my previous cases and stuff. So
Yeah.
when you have individuals that are newcomers that come to Canada, they actually are unaware of the child protection laws here. I mean, things have drastically changed in the last 2 decades,
Yeah.
but for example, physical discipline, we know it's frowned upon and discouraged in the Western world, but in the Eastern world, it happens, right? Um,
Right.
so the thing is, when you come here, when you come through immigration, they tell you, obviously they tell you the basic laws of what not to break, but nobody's there coaching you on, the child protection and what children's aid is, and nobody was really aware of it.
Right.
We had a situation where a newcomer had come, and then they did not know. So what happened, and the laws are very defined and clear here. So if you physically discipline a child, and all it takes is it's just a simple mark on the child, like it constitutes as assault, you will get charged,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so and it's a very gray area, because if your child happens to be for example light skin, that child is going to show that bruise a lot more than
Yeah.
someone of a more darker complexion, right?
Right.
You exerted the same force, except now one constitutes assault, one doesn't.
Yeah.
So when they get involved like that, I think what we tend to do is, when we have migrant families, we immediately, if they get involved, we walk them to the very basics of what child protection, like what. That's why understanding cultural difference is very important,
Right.
because you want to get to know them, right? You don't want to go in there to their family dynamics and start telling them how to be a parent and what you think is good for them. You want to
Exactly.
understand how they were raised, what are their beliefs, and
Right.
how they parent. So if you start seeing a little bit of discrepancy in what might land them in trouble here, like physical discipline, then you
Yeah.
want to have that conversation with them. And then, so, education and being proactive is key, because being reactive at the end of the day is just not going to get you anywhere. It just won't. And
Yeah.
in a situation, so like in that situation, the parents rectified it, and then Children's Aid, understood it, and they terminated the file. Right? They didn't even
Okay.
prolong because the parents, showed a willingness to not, exert physical discipline anymore, and they were utilizing more proactive, more positive parenting strategies.
Right. So
Yeah.
we do have some further questions, but we're running out of time. And
Yeah.
as we discussed before, we would like to have a follow-up podcast at a
Yeah.
later date, hopefully
Yes.
sooner than later. So that would be fantastic if we can have that. So I have a final question for you, but before we get there, I just want to run off some contact information about our group, our
Yeah.
organization. First of all, I'll give some numbers. Our phone number is 226-289-8784. Email address is info@voiceofmen360.org. And the website is www.voiceofmen360.org. So we're here requesting, asking people to join us as we move forward in our mission, trying to help men and boys in our societies. And as I mentioned before in the beginning, we do help other demographics as well. So you're welcome to come aboard. If it's a criticism, a suggestion, whatever the case might be, we welcome everybody. It doesn't matter. You could be a professional, an expert, a community organization, association, government official, business, whatever, individual, anything. You're welcome to come and share your whatever you want to impart with us. We would really appreciate that. So we're available on social media as well. We do have a Facebook group page. Please join our group, and you can see our daily activities, and obviously invite your friends as well. There are other social media platforms we're on, such as Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. We do have a YouTube channel, A Voice of Men 360. And if you can join us there, we would really appreciate it. And I'll put some comments and look at the videos. I'm sure you'd really gain some insight into what we do. And you might have some valuable information to share as well. So we welcome each and every one of you. So moving on, we have a final question here for you, Daniel. And it's regarding, can you share any contact information about your organization for those interested in learning more?
Yeah. So we service Ontario-wide. We're stationed in Toronto. So our phone number is 416-400-4042. Our website is www.safeharbor, so HARBOR familyaid.com. If you just type in 416-400-4042 on Google, we will show up. So again, if you are involved with Children's Aid on any level, whether ongoing or present investigations, that's what we support you with. We don't provide legal advice, but we coach you on how to navigate Children's Aid, what each steps are, what the investigation process are, what Children's Aid tends to look for in a home visit. We support you with collateral contacts. We are able to attend family-centered conference with you, speak to your collaterals, like with the service providers, with the school, with your consent, of course, and we navigate you through the process until a termination happens with your involvement, or you and Children's Aid have come to a mutually agreed upon understanding.
Okay, well, fantastic. So we're at pretty much at the end of today's podcast, and ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to a session here with Daniel Nithi, Executive Director of Child Protection and Family Services Specialist in Canada. Daniel, I want to thank you so very much. This has been a meaningful and enlightening session. I hope the audience have gained some knowledge, at least, and some understanding of how the system works. And if they're caught up in any similar situation, they know where they can turn for advice. One thing, Daniel, it's a for-profit organization, that there is a cost involved.
Sorry, say that one more time.
Is there a cost involved? It's a for-profit organization that you have?
Yes, it's for-profit. There's a cost involved. There's 4 different packages that we offer just based on the level of involvement and the complexity of your case.
Right.
However, due to financial constraints of some individuals and their ability, they do qualify for like a more subsidized tier. For
Right.
example, if they're like on social assistance, or if it came from a referral source, or if they fall under a certain income threshold, we subsidize the services.
Okay, understood. Thanks again, Daniel. I really appreciate you coming on, and we're looking forward to having you on for at least one more session to continue
Yep.
this absorbing discussion. And for the audience out there, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It's been a pleasure having you aboard, and we wish I didn't see any questions, but hopefully you take away something of value from this. And for the guy behind the scenes, the one who is doing all the heavy lifting as far as production goes, or producer, and the leader of the band, I like to say, Sivam Velautam, thank you very much for all that you've done and all that you're doing for the organization. So from all of us here in Canada, some of us, I'm in Whitby, Sivam in London, and Daniel is in Toronto. Thank you so much for joining us, and cheers. Have a good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you may be. Bye for now.